The Tigers were up by 4, bottom of the ninth, when my son-in-law walked over and unplugged the television mid-pitch. "We need this outlet for the baby monitor charger," he said, not even glancing at the blank screen. "You can finish watching on your phone." I sat there for a second, genuinely confused, waiting for him to plug it back in. He didn't. He just walked away like he'd asked me to pass the salt. My daughter Renee was in the kitchen, close enough to hear every word. She looked up from the dishes, looked at me, looked at her husband's back, and went right on rinsing a plate. Not a word, not even a flinch. The faucet kept running. That was the part that stuck with me longest, not the unplugged TV, but the silence that followed it, thick enough that I could hear my own heartbeat in my ears. I pushed myself up out of the recliner. My right hip has been arguing with me since the knee replacement 2 winters back, and it complained the way it always does, a slow, grinding protest. Marcus didn't even turn around. He was already crouched by the outlet, fiddling with the monitor cord like the game had never existed, like I'd never existed. I walked down the hall to the room they call the den now, the room that used to be my home office before they moved in. I closed the door, not hard, just enough. Then I sat on the edge of the daybed I sleep on now and looked at the cardboard boxes still stacked in the corner boxes I hadn't fully unpacked in 14 months. Like some part of me had known this wasn't going to be permanent, even when everyone kept calling it home. I'm 59, old enough to know that the body keeps a quiet ledger of every year you've lived, and it presents the bill whether you're ready or not. My knees crack like kindling. My lower back has its own weather system. But none of that is what kept me up at night. What kept me up was something harder to name, the sense that I was dissolving, one polite silence at a time, in a house I'd helped pay for. On the little shelf across from the daybed sat a photograph in a thin silver frame. My wife Carol, laughing at something off camera, sunlight catching the gray that had started coming in at her temples before the cancer ever showed up. She'd been gone 3 years that spring, pancreatic. 4 months from diagnosis to the funeral, fast enough that I sometimes still expect to hear her keys in the door. I picked up the frame. "Well," I said to her, quiet enough that nobody in the house could hear, "they unplugged the television on me tonight." Carol would have had something to say about that. She wasn't a yeller in 31 years of marriage. I think I heard her raise her voice maybe 4 times, but she had a particular stillness she'd go into right before she set somebody straight, and people learned to read it the way sailors read a darkening sky. If she'd been standing in that kitchen, Marcus would have plugged that television back in so fast the cord would have smoked. I set the photo down and opened the drawer of the little nightstand Carol and I bought at an estate sale in Asheville, back when we still did things like spontaneous Saturday drives. Inside were odds and ends, a warranty card for a lawnmower I no longer owned, a stack of birthday cards in Carol's handwriting, looping and slightly left-leaning. I pulled out the one from our last anniversary together. Inside, beneath the printed verse, she'd written 4 lines in blue ink. The last one read, "Don't you dare let anybody treat you like a guest in your own life, Daniel Wickfield. You built every room in this story." I sat with that sentence for a long while, long enough that the light outside the window shifted from orange to the deep blue that comes right before full dark. Somebody knocked, soft, almost apologetic. "Dad?" "It's me. Come in, Renee." She opened the door but didn't come all the way in, like she wasn't sure she had permission to take up that much space in a room that used to be mine before it became a den, before it became my bedroom by default. She had her arms crossed over a sweatshirt I recognized from her college years, 20-some years ago now, soft and faded at the elbows. "About the TV," she started. I waited. Marcus didn't mean anything by it. "The monitor's been glitching, and the only outlet that doesn't trip the breaker is that one." I nodded slowly. "Okay, he's just stressed. With the new schedule at the dealership and Mason waking up every 2 hours." "Okay," I said again. She rubbed the back of her neck, a gesture I recognized because it was mine, passed down the way certain things get passed down without anybody choosing it. "Did you want me to say something to him? Did you come in here to explain why he did it?" I asked. "Or to ask if I'm upset?" Her face tightened. "I don't want everybody walking around upset, Dad." I almost laughed, except none of it was funny. I'd heard some version of that sentence from her since she was 9 years old, and didn't want me to ground her older brother for breaking the porch swing. I don't want everybody upset. She'd built her whole life around that sentence, around being the seam that held things together quietly, at whatever cost. "I understand," I told her, because I did. and because there was no use saying anything else that night. She looked relieved, the way people look when a hard conversation ends sooner than they expected. Good. I'll heat you up some dinner. I'm fine. She left anyway, and I sat there listening to her footsteps fade down the hallway, back toward the sound of a baby monitor crackling to life and Marcus's voice, low and easy, asking what was for dinner. Life, moving on a few rooms away, without me in it. Around 10 that night, I made myself toast and peanut butter, standing at the kitchen counter because every chair at the table had a diaper bag, a bouncer seat, or a stack of unopened mail on it now. I looked out the window above the sink at the backyard. The maple Carol had planted the year Renee was born, now taller than the house, the little brick patio I'd laid myself one humid August with my own 2 hands in a rented tamper. The yard hadn't changed. The house around me had changed into something I didn't recognize. I didn't sleep much. Old habits had me up before sunrise anyway, sitting at the kitchen table with coffee, watching the sky over Dayton go from charcoal to pale gray. At 7:20, I picked up my phone and looked at a number I'd had saved in my contacts for almost 3 weeks. I'd gotten it from a fellow at the VFW hall, a retired mover who still did consulting work on the side. I hadn't known why I'd saved it at the time. I knew now. A woman answered on the second ring, cheerful in that practiced, professional way. Buckeye Cross-State Movers, this is Tammy. I looked around the kitchen, the cabinets. Carol and I had refinished ourselves over one long, paint-spattered weekend. The tile floor I'd laid the year Renee started middle school. I need to schedule a move, I said. Happy to help. What date were you thinking? I glanced at the calendar stuck to the fridge with a magnet from a long-closed diner. Day after tomorrow. There was a pause. That's quick, but we can make it work. After I hung up, my hands were shaking a little. Not from fear exactly, more like the feeling right before you jump into cold water, your body knowing something your mind hasn't fully caught up to yet. For the first time in over a year, I wasn't reacting to something. I was deciding something. Upstairs, I heard the baby start fussing. Then Marcus's tired voice. Then Renee's footsteps crossing the floor. Life continuing on schedule. They thought, if they thought about me at all that morning, that I was just an old man nursing a bruised ego over a television. The truth was a good deal more complicated than that, and they wouldn't understand how complicated until they came home from work the next evening to find out. Looking back, the unplugged television wasn't where it started. That was just the moment I stopped making excuses for everybody else's behavior. 14 months earlier, my son-in-law had called me on a Sunday afternoon while I was restaining the porch railing. Lake Erie humidity was already thick that spring, even in April. When I saw Renee's name on the screen instead of his, I almost didn't think anything of it until I heard the particular careful tone in her voice, the one she used right before bad news. Dad, can we ask you something? A few minutes later, I understood. Marcus had been laid off from his sales job for 6 weeks before finding something new, and even now the new position paid less. Their lease was ending in May. They had a baby on the way. They needed somewhere to land for a few months, maybe through the summer, just until they got back on their feet. I said yes before she'd even finished the sentence. Of course. This is your home too, sweetheart. I remember exactly how that felt, the warmth of being needed by my own daughter. Truthfully, the house had gotten too quiet after Carol died. I'd find myself leaving the radio on in rooms I wasn't even in, just to hear a human voice. So when Renee and Marcus moved in that May, bringing boxes and a crib still in its flat pack box, the house woke up again. There was traffic in the hallway. There was the smell of formula and coffee in the morning. For a while, I genuinely loved it. The first 2 months were fine, better than fine. Then the small things started, the way small things always do. Quietly enough that you don't notice the pattern until you're already standing in the middle of it. One Saturday, I came back from the hardware store to find my recliner had been moved out of its spot by the front window, the spot it had occupied for almost 20 years, and pushed into a corner near the closet. Oh, Renee said. When I asked, we needed room for the bassinet. It just made sense to shift things around. I held my bag of caulk tubes and looked at the chair sitting crooked in the corner like an afterthought, and I told myself it wasn't worth the fight. A few weeks after that, my fishing gear disappeared from the garage shelf where it had lived for a decade. Not stolen, reorganized. When I asked Marcus about it, he said, easy as anything. I cleared out some of the older stuff to make room for the stroller and the car seats. Hope that's all right. Older stuff. My tackle box had been a gift from my own father. Then came the boxes from the attic, Carol's Christmas ornaments, hand-painted years ago by her grandmother. Her collection of vintage cookbooks, dog-eared and stained from decades of actual use. I found them one afternoon stacked in the basement, neatly labeled in Renee's handwriting, like evidence being filed away. "I hope that's okay," she said when she caught me staring. The house was starting to feel cluttered. "The house?" I repeated. "Not your house specifically, just the house in general. Funny how a person can choose words that sound innocent and still manage to tell you exactly where you stand." I let it go. Again. That had become the whole shape of my days, letting things go. Because at 59, conflict cost something I didn't always have left to spend. I told myself Renee and Marcus weren't trying to hurt me. They were young, exhausted, stretched thin by a new baby and bills that never seemed to shrink. Most days I believed that completely. Marcus wasn't cruel. He helped the elderly couple next door shovel their walk every winter. He coached a youth baseball team on weekends, unpaid, because he genuinely loved it. People don't have to be bad people to stop seeing you. Around early autumn, I noticed something else shifting. Renee was disappearing too, just not physically. Every time Marcus wanted something, she found a way to agree with him quickly, smoothly, like oil over water. Every disagreement between him and me ended the same way. "Dad, it's really not a big deal. Dad, just let it go. Dad, he's under a lot of pressure right now." One night I sat alone in the garage long after everyone had gone to bed, surrounded by the smell of sawdust and motor oil, looking at an old bicycle hanging from a hook on the wall. Renee's first bike, purple with streamers on the handlebars, training wheels long gone. I remembered running behind her down Lindbergh Street, sweating through my undershirt, terrified she'd fall, and equally terrified to let go of the seat. That little girl would have stood in the middle of that kitchen and told anyone who unplugged her father's television exactly where they could put the baby monitor. The next sign came from my neighbor, Pauline, who'd lived 2 doors down since before Renee was born. She stopped me one afternoon while I was getting the mail. "How's the full house treating you?" she asked, smiling in that way that meant she already knew something I didn't. "Can't complain," I said. "I ran into your daughter at the Kroger on Bryce Road. She mentioned you all were staying with them now." Pauline caught herself. "Wait, I think I have that backward, don't I?" She did, but she hadn't misheard. 2 days later, I overheard Renee on the phone in the kitchen, not realizing I was in earshot. "Yeah, we're letting Dad stay with us for now, just until he gets settled somewhere smaller. Letting me stay." The mortgage had been paid off for 9 years. The property taxes, the homeowner's insurance, the new roof I'd put on after the derecho 3 summers back, every dollar of it traced back to my account, not theirs. I kept walking and said nothing. Then there was the phone call I couldn't shake for weeks afterward. I'd come downstairs late for a glass of water and heard Renee on speaker with her college roommate, not realizing I was within earshot in the hallway. "Honestly, at some point we have to think about whether Dad should be somewhere with more support, like an independent living place, eventually," said flatly. Matter of fact. Like she was discussing whether to refinance the car. I didn't sleep that night either. I lay there wondering if maybe I was the problem, too sensitive, too set in my ways, imagining slights that weren't really there. That's the particular cruelty of disrespect delivered slowly. It makes you doubt your own eyes before it ever has to raise its voice. Then, 4 days before the football game, something happened that ended the doubting for good. I was scrolling through a community marketplace app on my phone, mostly out of boredom, when a listing caught my eye. A vintage Singer sewing machine, oak cabinet, in excellent condition. I recognized it instantly. It had been Carol's mother's, then Carol's, sitting in the corner of our bedroom for as long as I could remember. The listing photo had been taken in our own living room. I clicked through. The seller's account was Renee's. My stomach dropped straight through the floor. I scrolled further. A cedar jewelry box that had belonged to Carol's grandmother. A set of crystal candlesticks from our wedding registry, all listed for sale. Nobody had asked me. Nobody had told me. For the first time through this whole slow unraveling, I wasn't hurt anymore. I was furious. And that fury rode shotgun with me clear through to that Sunday night, to the unplugged television, to the silence in the kitchen that told me everything I needed to know. The movers showed up the next morning at 9 sharp. 3 men, navy polos, a clean white box truck idling at the curb. The crew lead introduced himself as Gary, a solid handshake, the kind of calm competence I appreciated immediately. "You're Daniel?" "That's me." He glanced toward the front door. What are we moving today? I looked at the house, the porch railing I just restained, the brick walkway, the maple tree taller than the roofline now. 31 years, I said. Just the pieces of it that are actually mine. He didn't laugh, the way I half expected him to. He just nodded, like he understood exactly what kind of morning this was, and said, then let's be careful with it. Renee and Marcus had already left for work and daycare drop-off by the time the truck pulled up, and the house held the particular hush of a place waiting to be told something. The crew started with the easy items boxes from the den, my home office files, the framed photographs I'd taken down off the hallway wall the night before and stacked carefully by the door. I carried what I could, which wasn't much. My back had opinions about that. At one point, Gary caught me hauling a box of books and simply lifted it out of my hands. I've got this one. I can still manage. I don't doubt it, he said. But you're paying me to manage it instead. Around 10:30, they reached the recliner, still crooked in its exile corner. This one going? Gary asked. Absolutely. The younger mover grinned. Looks like it's seen some football games. More than I can count, I said, and felt something unexpected settle over me as they carried it out the front door. Not grief, not anger, relief, like I was finally pulling pieces of myself back out of a fire before they burned all the way down. The hardest part came next. Carol's cedar hope chest, tucked at the foot of what used to be our bed, and was now apparently a nursing chair and a stack of folded onesies. Inside were the things that meant nothing to anyone but me: old letters, ticket stubs from a Reds game on our first date, recipe cards in her looping handwriting, photographs from a life that had been entirely ours before it became a story other people moved around in. I rested my hand on the lid. The wood was smooth where Carol used to polish it every spring with lemon oil, and for a second I could almost smell it. Sir? You doing all right? Gary's voice pulled me back. I nodded, though I wasn't, not entirely. Yeah. Let's take it. By noon, sitting on the porch steps with a turkey sandwich I didn't have much appetite for, I watched them dismantle the workbench Marcus and I had built together in the garage 2 summers ago, back when he still asked me for help with things, back before the silence set in. That part hurt in a way the furniture hadn't. Not because of the wood, because of the memory bolted into it. My phone rang. My attorney, a sharp, no-nonsense woman named Patricia Hale, who'd handled my affairs since Carol's illness. How's the move going? She asked. Expensive, I said, and she laughed. I spoke with that contractor this morning, the one you asked me to track down. My stomach tightened. And he remembers meeting with Renee. About 5 weeks ago. 5 weeks. Before any of this. Before the television, Patricia said. Before everything. What was it about? A pause, longer this time. Renovation estimates. For converting the den, the room you've been sleeping in, and expanding the upstairs into a second nursery. I stood very still in the driveway, staring at the maple tree. A second nursery. That's what he said. He assumed everyone was already on the same page about you. Transitioning out was the phrase he used. I didn't say anything for a long moment. My bedroom, my home, the one Carol and I built our whole life inside of, was already being measured for a future that didn't include me in it. Not assisted living, not death. Just erasure, dressed up as floor plans. Daniel, Patricia said gently, you're not overreacting. I want you to hear that clearly. I closed my eyes and let that sentence do its work, dissolving weeks of quiet self-doubt all at once. By the time the truck pulled away that afternoon, the house looked stripped. Bare rectangles on the walls where photographs used to hang, the living room hollow in a way that had nothing to do with square footage. My phone buzzed once as I locked the front door behind me. A text from Renee. Everything okay? I read it, then put the phone away without answering, because in a few hours she'd find out for herself that nothing, in fact, was okay. I was sitting at my old Army buddy Walt's kitchen table when the call started. A bowl of his wife's chicken and dumplings in front of me when my phone lit up with Renee's name. I let it ring through. Then again. Then again. By 6:30, there were 19 missed calls between the two of them. Funny, I thought I'd lived under that roof for over a year, barely getting a full conversation, and now suddenly everybody wanted to talk. When I finally listened to the voicemails, Renee's first one was confused, almost frightened. Dad, where are all your things? Call me back. Marcus's was sharper. Defensive. Daniel, I don't even know what this is. Call us. I noticed he didn't call me Dad. He never really had. I finally answered when Renee called a third time. Dad, where are you? At Walt's. At Walt's. A long pause. What happened? Your stuff. It's all gone. I moved my belongings out, I said. Why? And the way she asked it, genuinely bewildered, told me she'd convinced herself the television, the chair, all of it, simply hadn't mattered. Do you remember the night Marcus unplugged the TV? Silence on the line. Renee, do you remember it? Yes, she said quietly. Good. That's all I needed to know you remembered. She started to cry a little, said something about how she should have spoken up that night, and for the first time in months, it sounded honest instead of like another excuse wearing an apology's clothes. I told her we'd talk soon and hung up before either of us could say something we weren't ready for yet. 2 days later, I agreed to meet them not because I was ready, but because some conversations don't get easier by waiting. We met at Pauline's house on a Thursday evening, neutral ground, the kitchen table where Carol used to sit drinking coffee and trading neighborhood gossip for 30 years. Patricia came with a folder. Walt came too, mostly because he refused to let me walk in alone, and he kept his promise to sit quiet for almost 20 minutes before failing spectacularly. Patricia laid it out plainly, the deed, the taxes, the insurance, all in my name, never in dispute. The real issue was the contractor estimates, the renovation plans drawn up months before anyone had said a word to me about any of it. Marcus turned to Renee, his face going pale. You knew about this? They were just early ideas, she said. You never mentioned they involved Dad's room. The room went quiet, and then Renee did something I hadn't expected. She started crying, not performing, just quietly unraveling. She talked about how scared she'd been about money, about Marcus's reduced hours, about watching her friends buy houses while she and Marcus had nothing of their own. I wasn't trying to push you out, she said. I don't even know what I was trying to do. Pauline, who'd known Carol since before Renee could walk, leaned forward. Do you know why your mother loved your father the way she did? Renee shook her head. Because he spent his whole life taking care of everyone around him. Her. You. And somewhere along the way, people who do that get treated like they'll never need anything in return. Nobody spoke for a long moment. Then I reached into my jacket and took out an old photograph, me at 30, Carol beside the half-finished porch railing, 8-year-old Renee holding a paintbrush nearly as tall as she was, the house behind us still raw and unfinished, the way we were. I handed it to her. You want to know what scared me most through all of this? I said. It wasn't the house. It was losing you. Renee's face crumpled, and she crossed the room and hugged me the way she used to when she was small, fierce, and unguarded. I'm sorry, Dad. I told them both, gently but plainly, that they needed to find their own place and gave them 60 days. Neither one argued. There was relief in both their faces, the particular relief of people who've been carrying a lie so long that the truth, even an uncomfortable one, finally feels lighter. 3 months later, I was sitting in my recliner back in its rightful spot by the front window watching a preseason game, and I noticed the house had gone quiet again. Not the hollow quiet of those first weeks after Carol died, a peaceful one. Renee and Marcus had found a small rental over in Kettering. The move-out had happened without drama, just boxes and a U-Haul, and a kind of tired acceptance on everyone's part. The day they left, Marcus lingered in the driveway after the truck was loaded. I don't really know how to make this right, he said. Neither do I told him honestly. Some things don't get fixed overnight. They get fixed slow, if they get fixed at all. He nodded, and for the first time since I'd known him, he didn't look for an easy way out of the conversation. I'd like to keep trying, if that's all right. It was more than all right. It was the first wholly honest thing he'd said to me in over a year. The house felt strange in the weeks after they left, too quiet in a different way. The absence of a crying baby and clattering dishes leaving its own kind of hole. Walt dragged me out fishing twice a week, whether I wanted to go or not, and eventually talked me into volunteering Tuesday mornings at the community workshop downtown, repairing donated furniture for families who needed it. The first week, I almost didn't show up. By the third week, I was the one unlocking the door. Renee started coming by on Sundays, sometimes with Mason in tow, and we'd sit on the porch while he napped in his stroller, not always talking, just present in the same space the way people who trust each other again learn to be. One Saturday, Marcus showed up with a toolbox, said the kitchen faucet at his folks' old place was leaking, and could he borrow my advice. We spent 2 hours under that sink together, not saying much. And somewhere in the quiet, I realized it felt almost normal again. Not healed completely, just honest. That Sunday afternoon, with the Browns losing the way they usually do, I reached for the remote on the side table and laughed out loud. A strip of masking tape ran across the back of it, and in Walt's blocky handwriting it read Daniel's remote. He'd done it as a joke weeks earlier, and I'd never taken it off. Every time I saw it, I smiled, not because of the remote, but because of what it stood for. A boundary, small and a little ridiculous, but mine. I looked around that living room, Carol's photograph back above the mantel, the cedar chest returned to its place at the foot of the bed, sunlight stretching long across the hardwood floor. And for the first time in longer than I could remember, the house felt entirely like home again. Not because nothing could ever hurt me there again. Not because every wound between my daughter and me had closed completely. Some scars just stay. But I'd learned something that took me 59 years to fully understand. I didn't win anything by taking those boxes out of that house. I won by finally refusing to keep handing pieces of myself away, quietly, one polite silence at a time. If you've ever had to draw a line with someone you love, you already know how much it costs. But it's worth paying. No matter how old you get, that much never changes. Sometimes love doesn't get stolen all at once. It slips away in small, quiet permissions. A chair moved here, a box packed there, until one day you realize you've been disappearing from your own life. The fix isn't anger. It's simply remembering you still get a say. Speak up early, set the boundary gently, and you'll find the people who truly love you don't leave. They finally start listening. A small note for you. This story was imagined and written by AI, meant purely to entertain, but woven through with a genuine, hopeful lesson for life.